In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this loose fitted blouse with only a few basic body measurements. This is a really easy draft, perfect for beginners, and there are no fastenings, so it's an easy sew. To begin, you need the following measurements taken with a measuring tape. I recommend working in centimetres. If you only have a measuring tape that works in inches, you can convert them on Google to centimetres afterwards. You will need your bust measurement. This is the widest point of your bust measured around your body. Your body length is the measurement from your neck to the length you want your hem, the distance from your neck to your waistline. The neckline on this pattern is drafted wide to sit as shown. You can adjust this to your own preferences, but ensure you will still be able to put your head through. You will need to measure from your central neck down and your central neck towards the shoulder. That gives you the neckline depth and width. You will then need to determine your arm length. Measure from neckline width point you have chosen. When drafting your blouse, I recommend using the arm dimensions given and then adjusting your pattern at the end to the style of blouse wanted. The reason for this is to draft a full length sleeve, you will place reference lines at different points. It's difficult to give these measurements precisely for all to follow, so it's easier to draft as instructed and then to add X centimetres to your sleeve length or to reduce it by X centimetres. We will be drawing only half the garment. Begin with a straight line that is the centre front of your top. Ensure it is vertical, and all lines you draw of this must be at a right angle unless otherwise stated. To form the neckline, measure across by 13.5 centimetres and measure down by 10 centimetres. This is your neckline width and depth measurement. Join these with a curve. To form the shoulder seam, measure down 12 centimetres from the top of the vertical line and draw out with a dotted line. This is a reference line we will use later. From the outer point of the neckline, measure 46 centimetres so that it hits the dotted reference line we made a moment ago. This gives an arm length of just past the elbow. Again, if you want to change this length, do so at the end rather than now to avoid strange arm angles. Measure down at a right angle from the end of the sleeve by 19 centimetres. Measure inwards, working at a right angle again, 21 centimetres. We will now form the body section. So from your vertical line, measure down your body length. Then from the base of this line, measure across by a quarter of your bust plus 5 centimetres. Draw a reference line upwards to your sleeve. Don't worry if it doesn't meet, we will shape the armpit area at the end. Add a second horizontal reference line at your waist point. Where these two reference lines meet, we will curve the outer seam line in by 2 centimetres towards the centre front. This gives us some waist definition. Complete by connecting the gap with an armpit area in a smooth curved line like so. Depending on your body measurements, you may choose to join the arm on the end of the line or along the line. Just make sure it's smooth with no sharp changes. This is the front of our garment. Label it and add the centre front fold marker. To get the back, trace a copy of your front. The back is very similar to the front but for 2 changes. First, raise the back neckline by 4 centimetres and redraw the curve. Next, we lower the hem at the centre back by 4 centimetres. Join this to the side seam with a curve. You could use this as your pattern, but I personally like to make one adjustment at this stage that I find gives this blouse a better balance and makes it hang more flattering from the shoulders. On the front neckline, measure up by 2.5 centimetres. Connect this with a straight line to your sleeve edge and extend the neck curve. On the back neckline, we will do the reverse, reducing by 2.5 centimetres. What we're effectively doing here is moving part of the back onto the front pattern so the shoulder seam sits at a pleasing point on the body. Once done, you need to true up your lines around your neck curve. The easiest way to do this is when you have cut them out, align them at the shoulder seam and confirm the neck curve is a nice smooth shape. You can alter as needed. Pattern complete, you want to add seam allowances and hemlines. I worked with 2 cm hems on the bottom edge and the sleeve and a 1 cm seam allowance. If you intend to construct this with French seams, I recommend using a 2 cm seam allowance. Also, make sure you add some notches to your shoulder seams and your side seams to allow you to match up during construction. This pattern can be cut with both the front and back on the fold, or if you have a wider fabric, it is more fabric efficient to add a centre back seam. I'll show you this when I cut, but bear it in mind when selecting your fabric choices. For fabric, I selected this 100% cotton linen textured fabric. It's nice and lightweight and breathable. You don't want anything too stiff for this blouse or it won't hang nicely, and you don't want stretch. As with all fabric, ensure you wash and press before you sew, or your garment may shrink on your first wash. To begin, I place my front pattern piece on the fold. You could repeat this again with the back, super simple and easy. Now, since my fabric has no obvious print and it has the width, I can fit this blouse out of 1.2 meters of fabric by turning the back and adding a seam allowance to the centre back. I like to use a French seam at the centre back because my fabric isn't fully opaque, so you can see the seams through it. I wanted it visually neat inside and out, so I added a 2 cm seam allowance to my centre back line before I cut. The back seam is the first part of your blouse you should complete if you have included it. If you have cut both front and back on the fold, you can skip ahead, although I will explain here how to create a French seam, which you can use for all other seams in the blouse too, if desired. So watch if you don't know this method, as I don't cover it again. Align your centre back seam, wrong sides together. This is where construction differs to most other seams. Pin to secure and sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance down to 0.5 centimetres. Press the seam as you sewn it. Open and press to one side. Close with right sides together, carefully placing the seam on the very edge of the fold. All raw edge is sandwiched between these two layers. Sew again with a 1 cm seam allowance. As you sew, you'll notice that you will not be catching your first seam allowance, which is the reason we trimmed it down. Open your back and press your seam to one side. It doesn't matter which one, but if you are doing French seams throughout a garment, it looks neater if you pick a consistent side or direction. From this point forward, I will be using a regular seam with an overlock seam finish. You can sew every seam with French seams, but remember to adjust these instructions appropriately. So for French, match wrong sides together first, then right. This is different to what I will tell you here. Place your back and front together, aligning the shoulder seams right sides together. Sew from the neckline to the arm for both sides. Always work in a symmetrical direction. It gives an even finish. Your seam allowances usually differ on a curve, but the seam line will match. Now finish the raw edge with your method of choice. I will be using my overlocker. You could use a zigzag stitch on your regular machine. I have a video linked for different seam finishing methods if you're unsure. You can also finish your seams as one or open. I have chosen as one due to how lightweight this fabric is and it's quicker. Press the seam to the back of the blouse. At this point, we will press the sleeve hem. Turn it under by 1 cm, then turn it under again. It's easier to do this now than when it is round later. Align the side seams on both sides, right sides together. Sew from arm to hem on both sides in turn. Make sure you unfold the sleeve hem we pressed and sew to the very edge. You'll likely find your folds align if you have measured and cut accurately. At the corners, be sure to work slow and guide your fabric round with your hands. You may wish to clip your curves of your seam allowance after this step. Stiffer fabric can have a puckered effect at the armpit otherwise. My fabric and the curve of my arm was gradual enough to not require this. Finish your seam allowances in your chosen method. Press your seams to the back if you have finished as one. It can help to use a sleeve hem for this step. As we have already pressed our sleeves hem, it's easy now to fold them back under themselves and pin. Make sure your seam allowances are facing the correct direction. You can see how much harder it will be to press these under now it's circular. So, with just short of a 1 cm seam allowance. you're left with a neat hem both inside and out. For the neckline, you need a 3 cm wide strip of bias binding. You can buy this ready-made or you can make your own from your fabric. I have a tutorial on this linked above. First, measure your neckline on your blouse to determine how much you will need. I always make more to give me plenty of flexibility. Apply your bias binding to your neckline, right sides together. Begin working on the back to the side as this is a point of low visibility and work your way around. Don't worry about the join at this point, I'll show you that. Just ensure you have an overlap. Begin sewing with 1 cm seam allowance, about 5 cm from where you started pinning. Follow it round till you have a gap from where you started of about 10 cm. Stop sewing and remove from your machine. We're going to sew the 2 ends of the strip together at the point they meet. So first, cut away the bulk of the excess so you can see clearly. Align the ends to the neckline until they meet and mark that point. Pin it and ensure the ends align. Sew in a straight line exactly where your pin is across your binding. Trim your seam allowance down to about 1/4 inch and open it up. Now complete the neckline, sewing from where we stopped earlier to where we began. A complete full circle. Trim the seam allowance down to 0.5 centimetres. The binding sits fully inside the blouse out of view. We will tuck it under by hand and pin it. Begin by folding the raw edge of the binding to meet the line of stitches we just made. Then fold it all over, placing the stitch line on the neckline edge. Pin. Go around the full neckline in this manner. It's not hard, but it can be fiddly due to the small size. Just work slowly. You usually have to redo your first few once you have more in. This is one of them processes where the more you have pinned, the more the fabric folds naturally into the position it should be. Once done, sew around with just short of a 1 cm seam allowance. Now alternatively, you can hand stitch this for a completely invisible finish on the neckline. It's your choice. Press the neckline to complete. The bottom hem is formed like we did the sleeve hem. Fold under by 1 cm and then fold under again by 1 cm. Check your seam allowance face the correct way as you go. This is easier done on an ironing board as you don't have to worry about the layer below, but I can't film on mine, so please excuse my slightly awkward pressing here. Sew with just under 1 cm seam allowance or hand stitch to match your neckline. Here is the complete blouse. My mannequin is a size 10 and the blouse is for a size 14, but you can see the shape better. It's loose fitted, no fastenings. You have that lovely French seam on the centre back which looks pretty. The dropped hemline at the back gives you modesty when moving, it's subtle. The neckline binding is fully inside and matches the appearance of the sleeve hem and bottom hem from the exterior. This is a relatively quick make. You can do this in an afternoon. If you're new to sewing, it's got some good techniques to learn and practice. If you have enjoyed today's video, please hit the thumbs up. It helps me create more free content. If you wish to see that content, hit subscribe and I'll be sharing another video soon. Thank you for sticking to the end and happy sewing.